and I'm honored to be here today. We have a wonderful international panel to talk about these issues, which are keenly important given the topics of the morning. First, a panelist I'll introduce this morning is Mathilde Fiquet. She is the EU Legal Affairs Manager of the Federation of European Direct and Interactive Marketing, which we call FEDMA. FEDMA represents the interests of the entire data-driven marketing value chain, and what Mathilde does is she coordinates all the legal affairs of FEDMA. She gets involved in all the data protection and privacy issues, and she's right in the middle of everything with self-regulation of the digital environment that we're talking about throughout the entire EU. Next panelist is Genie Barton. Genie Barton is from the USA. She's the Vice President, Counsel of Better Business Bureaus, and is the director of the Advertising Self-Regulatory Council Online Interest-Based Advertising Accountability Program, which is the USA's self-regulatory arm dealing with all the digital advertising issues. Genie was the Vice President General Counsel of US Telecom and the Broadband Association. She's worked in every end of the federal government in the United States, including the General Counsel Office for the Department of Commerce. She worked at the Federal Communications Commission. She is extremely well versed in this for a long time. Next panelist is Neil Joyce. Neil Joyce is the Managing Director of Signal. And Signal, he heads up the EMEA region of Signal, and he's also in charge of leading teams in the UK, France, Germany, and Dubai. And where he puts together, he navigates between the brands and customers in the sales and marketing funnel that we're all dealing with, bridging the gap between digital and physical. Prior to Signal, he worked in at Axiom, where he dealt with media agencies, publishers, and the top CMOs across Axiom's relationships. He was responsible for building and targeting and measuring client engagement teams across the media outlets, and he forged partnership relationships with companies such as Google and Facebook, and he's well versed in these areas, doing business in this digital environment. And the last panelist is Angela Mills-Wade. Angela Mills-Wade is the Executive Director of the European Publishers Council, a high-level lobbying group which incorporates the CEOs and CMOs of major European media corporations, magazine, newspapers, internet publishing, as well as radio and TV broadcasters. She holds a number of industry and public appointments, including she's the chairman of the Media Committee of the European Advertising Standards Alliance. She is the chairman of the European Advertising Standards Alliance and the DAA Steering Group on OBA Self-Regulatory Framework, and she's chairman of European Analytica, an independent consulting company. Angela has been dealing in the digital arena for a long time. Prior to all her current positions, she was the head of European Affairs and Special Issues for the UK Advertising Association. So as you can see, we have a group of well-versed experts in this arena of technology and regulation. We heard this morning that data and technology are shaping the future of the advertising industry. Steve King told us all about how advertising is growing and exploding, the growth of mobile. We all care about privacy. We all are in this business, understanding that content is king, content is abundant, content seems to be, free and out there. We're going to be talking about the advertising and marketing world in the middle of all this digital quagmire that we're dealing with. Advertising today is all about counting and targeting and aiming communications, and it seems to be all accessible today to consumers on demand without cost. So in the middle of all this, we have all these regulations. We in the industry are dealing in this world of providing information, securing data, protecting content. These are all keen concerns for publishers. Angela Mills-Wade, you're in the unique position being at the fulcrum of everything with publishers. You've lived in this world of regulation. You go back and forth to Brussels. You're dealing with all the commissioners. Are we on a collision course with regulators? What's the publisher's perspective on all this? What should we be doing? Does the current business model dealing with privacy and data protection work for business, regulators, and consumers today? From a publisher's perspective, from your perspective, Angela.
Ooh, lot of questions there, Carla. Are we on a collision course? Well, I really hope not, but it's hard. It's really hard for the regulators. The proliferation of data is global, it's unstoppable, it's multi-sectoral, and that makes it really hard for them. Last week they published a digital single market strategy, and data is right in there, right in the heart of it. But in the usual way of Brussels, it's contradictory. On the one hand, they say next year they're going to launch a free flow of data initiative about access to data, the data flows, interoperability, all good things for business. On the other hand, they're 5 years along a road, a very slow road, of trying to reform data privacy, data protection legislation. And the amount of data and the sorts of things that are happening in the market today were unimaginable 5 years ago when they started on this path, and they haven't finished. And so the heart of what they are doing, generally speaking, when it comes to the laws, have all been about citizens. What can citizens do with their data? What control do they have over it? Can they trust in the businesses who are collecting their data? When it comes to e-privacy and the famous cookie directive, when it came to advertising, it was all about the fear of harm, the fear of tracking without knowledge, let alone consent. And no law can really handle that kind of thing. So looking to the future, the European Commission's got to kind of create some magic whereby they have a strategy which incentivizes innovation, incentivizes growth, doesn't put Europeans at a competitive disadvantage to the United States, which is a big danger if they go too far with their regulations. And that's hard. What you asked me about publishers too. What do publishers think? Well, as we heard this morning, and you will continue to hear all day long, publishers collect a huge amount of data. They always have in different ways, but now with digital, it's slightly different. I think trust is a really important part of that. You can carry on collecting huge amounts of data if the people you're collecting it from trust you, what you're going to do with it. So I would say that's probably where we are at the moment. And self-regulation, of course, is the whole thing that binds it all together, which is what I've spent so much time doing.
You've been, Angela was in charge of putting together the whole framework for self-regulation in the EU and can speak very well about that at length. We talk, we go to these conferences and you hear all about the explosion of digital. We all talk about the targeting of consumers, the gathering of information. Trust is important, transparency and control are important for the consumer. You talked about self-regulation in the United States. Genie, Barton, you're in charge of all self-regulation for this digital arena in the United States. So what's going on and what can be done, what has been done to address this, because it's hugely complicated, and is there really a solution? You head up this thing called the DAA. What's that?
It's the Digital Advertising Alliance, and there is the EDAA in the EU, and there is the DAAC in Canada. But it did start in the United States. Happily, it has flavors and self-regulators of its own in other jurisdictions who are putting it together in ways that match what those jurisdictions want. But it all stands for one principle, and that is build trust without destroying innovation. In fact, preserve innovation by creating transparency and consumer control using technology in ways that regulators can understand, and more importantly, consumers can understand and use. We have a little blue icon in the corner of Edge. The consumer clicks on it. It's taken to a place where the consumer can learn more about interest-based advertising, and if the consumer chooses opt-out. This is simple, and what it is real-time notice using technology. And that, we think, is a way that the technology can help to build trust, preserve innovative new things from overregulation. And we're also able to move with trends. When we went to native advertising, interest-based native ads we cover. When we went away from cookies, I was able to write a warning to companies that we're tech neutral. Whatever way you're tracking, we're there, provide transparency and choice. And we're going to mobile. I'll start enforcing that in September. We already have a choice app out.
Let me slow you down a little bit. I want to ask something. I'm going to come. This icon up in the corner, okay, if you're going to remember something. How many of you have ever seen this icon in the corner of an ad? That's what I'm afraid of. Because we talk about this icon, and the EU has it, the United States has it. It's a little triangular icon. Talk about what it is on the website that it sends you to and what it really does.
Okay.
Okay.
It's a little blue sideways triangle in the corner of ads. It suffers from the same problem that ads suffer from, which is people don't generally look at them too much, which is why we're all here. And so what it does is it tells you the ad you're seeing is interest-based. It is personalized for the consumer based on a segment that the consumer should be interested in.
And it sends you to a website.
It sends you to a website.
In other words, you're getting an ad, you've searched hotels in Dubai, and I want to go to Dubai, and I search hotels in Dubai, and then all of a sudden I'm getting all this additional information about Dubai. Why am I getting this?
So instead of being creeped out, you should feel, I know why. And that seems to be the big problem, that if a consumer doesn't understand and is surprised by some unknown entity tracking him or her, then the consumer loses the sense of trust and the sense of engagement that we're all trying to create. So this is a way, and we really all do need to look at it and to tell everyone about it and to use it, even though a trillion are served a month, until we get a campaign that engages people in seeing it. We did it. We did it in the U.S.
And I slow it down because if there's one thing we want, there's a couple things to remember, and that this self-regulatory, because we all sit here, and I know you guys are all here, and you're all hungry, we're going to go to lunch. But this is important stuff, just to remember, to keep this machine of advertising going, to have the accountability and transparency. So what Genie's talking about, what Angela's talking about, is the self-regulation that exists in this digital environment that gives the consumers control and awareness of why they're getting the advertising, which honestly is the complaint that government has, is that why are we being targeted? You hear all day about how we're gathering information, being targeted. These are the solutions to that, this DIA icon. And what are you doing about mobile now, Genie?
We have an app out that gives consumers choice. Very simple. They download it. They express their choices about being tracked. In September, I will start enforcing this. So the big things are personalized location, and when apps start collecting your address book, your contacts, data that you've put in yourself. People are quite sensitive about that. What this does, in addition to just telling you you've got an interest-based ad, is it gives you an opt-in choice about those kinds of collections that are most sensitive, and an opt-out choice about all other collections.
And before we go, I'm going to go back to the EU. When Genie says she enforces it, she's the enforcer, which basically is confirming that the advertiser is doing what it said it was going to do, right?
Yes, and if they don't, it's basically name and shame, and refer if they don't do what I've recommended that they do.
It's self-regulation. So both what Angela designed in Europe with her whole team, it's not a solo act, but, and Oliver Gray is in the back of the room. Oliver can wave, the European Advertising Standards Alliance. And what Genie enforces is this self-regulatory arm to keep the machine, and this is what I want to reinforce, keep the machine of advertising going, because we have to act with transparency and accountability. Now, Mathilde, FEDMA is this wonderful organization, which I hope you have heard of, the Direct Marketers Association for Europe. And it has existed and has been in the space of data protection and privacy and following these issues long before the internet, Al Gore ever invented the internet. So before advertisers ever jumped onto the internet, FEDMA was there worried about privacy and data protection because of the European Data Protection Program. So you have lived in this space. And so how do we strike this balance? What do we do? Because you actually represent people making money out there, which is important. So your advertisers and your clients, your members, what should we be doing? What should they do? What do they do? What do you tell them?
Well, indeed, thank you. Indeed, it's actually very, very important for the data-driven marketing industry. Privacy and data protection are really the core. What I can say, being from an organization that actually exists even before the internet and having dealt with data protection even before the internet, is that actually the concerns still remain. They're the same. It's just that they're growing in parallel with the increasing use of data, so they're growing proportionally to the use of data. But also from a legal point of view, the principle of data protection are the same. We're not, the regulators and legislators in Brussels are not talking about reinventing the wheels. They're using the same principle to protect the individuals, but in a different context. So the key issue today is how do we adapt those legal contexts, the legal principles, to the technologies that uses data to deliver ads. So this is really bridging the gap between the legal principles and the day-to-day life of company. And in that field, FEDMA believes that self-regulation has actually a huge role to play. We did play that role in the past, providing codes of conduct and solutions to be able to process data in an ethical way. And we're doing it again with a new code of conduct to prepare for the future legal framework. The idea of the right balance is really to find the right way between what you can do with data and what the individual actually expects you to do with data. This is where the key lie. But actually, individuals do expect now to receive relevant advertising. They do expect their data to be used because there's this relationship of trust between the individual and the company. But what's important is that this relationship is balanced and the individual remains in power in a way because he has control.
I have, this is one of those smart pieces that ad agencies from Leo Burnett, information people, and all kinds of quotes from pieces of research in the digital arena just to do with privacy. And it's interesting, there was a Wall Street Journal study that said 65% of shoppers are willing to share data as long as they understand that it benefits them, which is amazing. 65% of people want to share data. So we talked about this little DAA icon, this little triangle thing. Do you think that's going to work with the government? Do they understand? I mean, this audience didn't even know it existed, and that's what scares me, because these are sophisticated people who have gone out. You guys are sophisticated international people who have gone out of your way to be here today. And you haven't heard about the icon. So what do you think that the government people really care about the icon? Is it going to save the day, or what do we do?
Right. So as Angela and Genie mentioned it, the icon is really a tool to empower the individual by providing the information, the possibility to opt out, but also a way to complain if needed. And those three ingredients really makes the regulators and the legislator in Brussels interested with the program. The EDA has built a very good relationship of trust with the European Commission, and that's a relation we want to keep going. However, there is also one important point which is to be mentioned, is that there have been a lot of changes in the past year in the European Union. We also have new projects like the digital single market, and there is this discrepancy between the objective of some part of the EU and some other part, for instance, with the data protection legislation. So what's really important here, and to keep convincing the regulator and the legislators, is that the industry sees that opportunity. That this is basically an opportunity, and we need to seize them as an industry, saying we keep being proactive, we keep being engaging, and we keep demonstrating compliance and finding solutions for new challenges that raise up in that field.
It's scary for an industry, it's scary for the industry person to hear about all this regulation. So you kind of go, la, 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 you know, let's not listen to it, because it's just too complicated. And maybe this whole world of regulation and technology, maybe, you know, is this digital world just for geeks and lawyers, you know? It's, sometimes you have to start to think about that. But, you know, Neil's here to prove that you can actually make money in this arena. You've worked at Axiom, which is right in the heart of big data. and you're working at Signal now in the heart of big data. And so this is an audience full of people who are here not to hear about the law, but to learn how to make money better. How to, we're in the commerce business, we're in the communication business. Tell us about how to navigate through this, because it is complicated. And what does Signal do, and how do you guys get involved in all this stuff?
Thank you very much. Yeah, it is complex, right? There's no arguments from it. I think just looking purely around privacy, regulation, and all the considerations around that, it could be, let's put it in the too hard box. Look, there's arguments for and against that to varying degrees. I think the biggest summary I'd talk about with a lot of clients that we work with right now is that they're very early on that journey around trying to leverage all of the data that they're allowed to and thinking about the specific use cases versus their business as usual. I think given the conversation around data and privacy just amongst this panel here, that the easiest use case that we typically talk to our clients about is collecting all of that data in a way that's meaningful for you and the brands that you're representing. The specific thing we keep testing is actually using that data to stop targeting people. So I know it sounds very, very basic, and the conversation around direct marketing and CRM are very, very prevalent, but drive me a relevant ad when I'm online, but actually leverage all the information you've got about me that I've actually provided with you and actually make sure that experience has been enriched. So you talked about the airline example and Dubai in specific. So if you think about it right now, you go to a site, you search for a flight, you may have bought that flight, but I can guarantee you'll get targeted for the next 3 weeks with that ad. So that consumer engagement and trust is actually broken straight away, where the ability to leverage data to suppress that ad is really, really easy. So I think that's one way that we actually start off with clients. The other thing comes down to actually what's the top line incremental gain you're likely to get out of it. I'm not here to say it's going to be 1%, I'm not here to say it's 10%, because a lot of people are actually testing a lot of these initiatives out right now. Before technology, it wasn't possible to do it. So Signal's really helping clients, and when I say clients, is either publishers or actually the advertisers themselves collect data, however a consumer engage with your brand. We align that with all of the privacy policies that you've got and the regulation that's required. And then we're saying, actually, where do you actually engage back with that consumer? And actually, what does the top line gain look like on the back of it?
One of the issues, huge issues, is this issue of data security, because you're gathering up all this information, and everyone's gathering information, but the integrity of that information and maintaining and controlling that information is very important. You hear about data breaches all the time. So, Angela, do you want to just talk about data and the concern and the trust and what does that do to a brand?
Well, I think the worst nightmare for a CEO or a CTO of a company would be to wake up one morning and find they've had this gigantic data breach and your brand is just gone, your trust is gone. I mean, that's the hard reality. But we seem to be on this path of just collecting more and more data, and there has to be a way of having policies where if you're not using it, you lose it, because the more data you keep, the more at risk you are.
But it's also more valuable. Neil, go back to you're gathering a lot of data, or your clients gather data. Doesn't that make the company more valuable, and they want to be gathering the data? So
It really does depend, and I'll take your point actually, that kind of like latency around data is a key thing, and again we spend a lot of time talking to clients around it, because it's kind of that simplistic way of, so you can capture all this data and collect it, but so what are you going to do with it? What does your business model like? So you take the airline example, being in market when a customer's in market for it in that short time frame is really, really vital. Do you need to capture a lot of other information around them? Perhaps, but what do you want to actually do with it? So it's actually defining use cases against the regulation and actually your overall business objective, which is the key thing within the mix of all of this.
Are your clients aware of the regulations when you start talking to them? Is that how soon does it come up in the conversation?
It comes up in the first meeting every time, because look, there's an inherent fear around Big Brother, right? Yeah. In some way, shape or form.
I think that the fear of privacy is a lot more around Big Brother than it is than around advertisers and the marketing issue. People are afraid of sharing information, not because of maybe a retailer as much as my health situation, or the government's going to come and look for something. I mean, do you want to address this?
I just wanted to mention that in the work that we're doing with the European institutions on the general data protection regulation, when the whole topic started 6 years ago, direct marketing was one of the key issue to address. Data used for advertising purposes, and then the big giants always collecting data of individuals. And then we had the Snowden revelation. And at some point, to a certain extent, I was pleased because we came as the second target after government use of data anymore afterwards. That was interesting.
Here's another soundbite of facts that only 4% are concerned. 4% of consumers are concerned about behavioral targeting. The biggest privacy concern was identity theft, 39%, viruses and malware, 33%, government surveillance, 12%, cyberbullying, 40%, and 70% prefer targeted ads that really make sense for them. That's an ad week. Now, that may be a biased source, but that's an ad week survey.
And that's what the research shows, where we ran advertising campaigns to tell people about the icon. Obviously, the visits to the website went up dramatically in those markets, and very, very small percentage of people opt out. Very, very few. They spend quite a bit of time on the website. They're obviously trying to understand why they're at this site, what goes on with their data, that they do have the opportunity to opt out. You can do a one-click opt-out of all ad tracking for targeting purposes, but they don't. They think, okay, I got that, that's fine.
Genie, when you're enforcing, what kind of companies are you dealing with in the enforcement arena?
It can be any company because we do our best to spot check all companies. We just had 4 actions that actually involved popular websites, at least in the United States. Etsy was one, Imgur, which is basically visual, and 2 others. And this was to remind them that when third parties were on their sites collecting data, they needed to provide notice of that collection and a way to opt out.
So when you say you're getting into mobile, you're getting into apps and what
We're
apps
getting
do
into
with
apps.
data.
We're also getting into operating systems, and we're getting into devices, and we're creating lots of little clever ways of doing that. And it's all really because we have to educate consumers and regulators. The regulators started in the United States just as they started in Europe, looking at these villainous red shoes that were tracking you around the internet. And after a few years and self-regulatory programs, they started to realize, and I think Snowden also.
Snowden made a huge difference in all kinds of ways, but
in
he
some
didn't
negative and
wake
some
up
positive
people
ways.
to the fact that you're being tracked.
Tracking it was already a bad word, and it became a worse word, but it also shifted the attention away from advertising a bit and onto collection for less benign purposes. And now in the United States, what has started to happen is the buzzwords are big data, whatever that means, and how do we protect consumers against uses that are not in their best interests? And that's a tough one.
Neil, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, it's ultimately the holy grail, right, within all of this. And I think the conversation here is obviously navigate towards consumers, and obviously regulation and consumers the most important part of all this equation. I then put my business hat on for a second and think about the brands, and it's saying, well, I don't still believe that a lot of brands understand the amount of trackers that are on their sites, actually, they can't provide the visibility back to consumers.
They don't. We find that brands know about a third of the trackers on their site. Part of that is because different people within the company just merrily download free things, forgetting that if it's free, you are the product, and they don't take things off when they're finished using them. And then there are data scrapers who are costing you money that are on your sites. They're also slowing your load. And so it really pays for the brands to know who's there and get rid of those that shouldn't be there.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about this free marketplace we've created. Before I move on, do you want to add anything to this, Mathilde? The data is out there. People are scraping data. You said free. Well, also, there's huge, robust content. Everyone is into creation of content. We've got crowdsourcing of content creatively. and everything seems to be out there in public, and I've heard the term even public domain, as if we can just grab and take anything off the internet because it's all freely accessible. And we're in this environment where piracy, which we could call theft, is on a rise. Angela, you guys are in the publishing business, your members. I'm sure this must be driving them nuts, the piracy issues.
Yes, it has a huge cost. This sort of illusion of everything for free, it's just not true. Everything has a cost, and we should all care about it, because if piracy gets out of hand, we're not just talking about some faceless CEO losing his job or the stock market being affected. We're talking about things that people value and things that people care about. We're talking about your favorite TV series or the newspaper that you read since you were in college. And if those things go, it's other people's jobs that go, the people who create those things that go. And it's not just those companies that lose out, it's society and eventually democracy that are harmed. And all these things, you have to be, newspapers and magazines may put things out to the public free at the point of access, but you still have to pay journalists, photographers, editors, marketers, lawyers, everybody to get the stuff out there. And this sort of sharing economy does have a cost.
We have created, in this industry, we've created a wonderful ecosystem. And the ecosystem is obviously dependent upon advertising. That's why we're here, and we're the foundation of a free press, and the ecosystem is dependent upon that. But when there's a taking, the public taking, and the free content, is when we start stealing that content, it erodes the ecosystem.
But the worst thing's not just the consumer. I mean, consumers take newspaper articles, share them on Facebook. That's good. That's fine. But when other companies free ride on the investment of the production of that content, that's where the harm is caused.
And does that happen?
Yes, all the time.
Do you want to add to this? I mean, the taking?
I think it's just one point that from an advertising and the use of data for advertising purposes it's a point that is really difficult to make understand to decision makers and regulators, that you need both to make the internet functioning and to provide that access to the individuals. And that's the statement that needs to be repeated on a regular basis to them to make sure the message goes through. And that's part also of the digital single market. If you want to have an internet that works well, the way the European Commission is looking at it, then you need to have revenues. And if the individual is not paying, then...
Well, we all believe in revenue, Mathilde.
Yes, I'm sure
this is what we do believe in growing the revenue and having the right balance. I'm going to ask this group of panelists to think about, we've talked about a lot of issues today. If you had to provide everyone in this room a piece of advice to take home, to tweet, to think about, to, in a consolidated, concise way, because I know everyone's I hope you're not glazed over. I hope we kept you awake as we talked about self-regulation, but one nugget of advice would you give to someone to help them make money, help them in the business, and help them not get into trouble with regulators? Because this whole regulation thing is always out there, but we have to navigate through it. Who wants to go first?
Well,
Okay.
to come back to the challenge of the legal framework that is changing in Europe related to data protection, I think my advice would be for the industry to gather as soon as possible with other industries and trade associations to proactively engage and show responsibilities in trying to find solutions on how to implement those new rules to the technologies. Because if we don't do it, if we wait, we'll just be submitted to whatever solution anyone else finds.
And because the industry has done a lot here, if you don't know about it, learn about it.
Yes.
Yes. Genie.
I would say just because you can doesn't mean you should. That is, don't surprise your consumer, the individuals, the people who visit your websites. Engage them and show your respect for their privacy, and they will trust you, and trust is the best way to start making more money.
So always keep that brand trust at forefront. Keep the brand trust at forefront, and that dialogue that you're creating, even through technology, brand trust is key.
Right.
Neil.
Yeah, so look, there's a couple of ways I really think about it, and this goes against my heritage of being all about data. This is not about data, right? This is about people. We spend so much time thinking about device and cookie when reality is it's about understanding who that person is and making decisions within frameworks against that.
That's an excellent point, and that's, again, putting the consumer first.
I would put the consumer first too, and from a regulator's point of view, trying to put myself in the seat of a European regulator, they are always going on about the citizens, and they put the citizens first. So if you want your customers to trust what you're doing with the data, you've got to trust them, and you've got to speak to them in layman language, explaining what they can do to jump out of your data pool. And if you don't, that's what the regulators are looking at. And that's why the regulations will come round full circle and bite you.
And the regulation can come around full circle and bite you, and the self-regulation can nip at you. And I guess I want to not only thank the panelists, I'll give you, my own little advice, which is not to delegate responsibility for all of this. What I see, and I've been within this space for a long time, and too often marketing people will delegate the responsibility for the legal or the self-regulation or, that's somebody else's job. I'm in the job of doing the advertising or the creative. And it's really integrated. Unless you truly understand the import of it, it's not going to be addressed in the most creative and responsible and aggressive way. So please get involved, listen to it. I had a slide up here with everyone's tweet handle. So I'm going to also ask everyone to give your tweet handle if you want to follow us on Twitter. Angela.
It's EPC_Angela.
Enjoy07.
Privacy Genie.
Fatma.
And Carla Adlaw. @Carla Adlaw. Okay? Thank you very much.